Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to e.law's CLE Webinar on e.discovery technology and online tutorial. My name is Nathan Wigington, the National Sales and Marketing Manager, and I'm joined today by our presenter, Jarrett, who is our Software Products Manager. So guys, I just want to run through a quick few housekeeping ins and outs and do's and don'ts before we get cracking. So what you should all be seeing now is just a visual on the slides. If you want to open the slides up to full screen, all you need to do is click on the arrows on the top left below the desktop sharing, and this will go to full screen mode. We're going to place everyone on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions as we go through, you're more than welcome to write them in the bottom left-hand corner on the online note screen. And we'll try and get through those and answer them as we go through. Now, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Jarrett, who's going to start with the presentation, and we hope you enjoy this.
Thanks for that, Nathan. So I'll go ahead and start the slideshow. First, I'll have a little poll here. Also, if anyone has any troubles hearing or seeing the presentation, just type into the chat window, and we have someone who will reach out to help you. So let's go ahead, and I'm just going to launch a poll. I'm just wondering who our attendees are today. So I'm just going to ask, what kind of organization do you work for? So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. So if you can go ahead and vote there, we'll get an idea. Plenty of law firms. I should say today's presentation, most of the material is relevant really to everyone, but you'll see kind of a few tidbits that really are focused on either kind of law firm, government agency, or in-house corporate. These tend to be our main client base. I think half the people have voted. We'll give it another few seconds. Okay, so it seems like mostly we have law firms here today. One government and a few independent consultants. I think we had a few in-house corporates register, so they might be running late. But yeah, you'll see a little bit, you'll see a few features that are targeted right specifically kind of for your organization. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the slides here. So today we're going to talk about, first I'll tell you a little bit about the historical approach to discovery and document review, really kind of before the e.discovery. Then we'll talk about some of this buzzword you may have heard called early case assessment. And this will tell you a bit about kind of how you can start to tackle large data sets as they're coming in. We'll then spend some time on kind of this standard review, and I'll talk about our review product called Relativity. I have also a few case studies, which really talk about some of the kind of clever things that we've done for a few customers over the past few years. And then finally, we'll do about a 15-20 minute kind of quick Relativity demo to actually show you what an example of review software looks like. Okay, so the next slide, just a bit about myself. I got my start at the U.S. Department of Justice. I worked initially at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York. For anyone who recently saw The Wolf of Wall Street, that was our office, which prosecuted the main character there, Jordan Belfort. And I worked on a few, a fraud case, which I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about, and a Ponzi investment scheme. I worked for a few years as a consultant to several New York City law firms, and then I've been here at e.law for about 5 years as the Software Products Manager. And I look after various e.discovery management and then Relativity, which is our review system. Okay, so let's just talk a bit about the historical approach. The first case I actually ever worked on was a criminal matter. It was a consumer fraud, which focused on fake charges on bills. It was actually, how the scheme worked was you may have seen in the back of magazines ads for free psychic readings. If you actually called any of these phone numbers, you'd get your psychic reading, but you get signed up for a reoccurring voicemail charge. And this is the mid-'90s, so it was something like $30 a month. And lots of people wouldn't notice for months, and they'd have to have a big hassle to kind of get a refund. And there were 5 million victims, basically, that were hit by these charges. And then really over 10 years, they built $1 billion. So when they started tracing the money back, they actually found that the kind of key organizers were members of the Gambino organized crime family. So at that point, tons of resources kind of got dumped onto the task. So we had approximately 1 million documents. We had 6 federal and state agencies. We had several prosecutors, agents. We had about 20 kind of staff members all dedicated full-time to this case. We had 10 defendants, literally millions of victims who are our witnesses. And we ended up with about 2 kind of war rooms full of boxes and a few hard drives. Not a lot of electronic material in the scheme of things. So how did we actually review all this material? So we manually reviewed 1 million documents. Very limited use of technology. We're scanning documents, but really only for use presenting them in court. And it took us 2 years. So 2 years of 20 people full-time to review these 1 million documents. We had ultimately one of our key witnesses cooperated and was going to testify against the mob, and the 10 defendants pled guilty on the eve of trial. So this is kind of historically how we've done a case, so about a bit over 10 years ago. Now, if we move to the current day, we have significantly more amounts of data to deal with. In part, this is because, if you see my graphic here, back in the 50s, we have a gigabyte, which is 1 billion bits of information, costs $2 million to store. And now, thanks to Steve Jobs, or whoever that is, it's less than $2. So really, storage has become cheap, hence we've been filling it up. Now, what does that mean for us in this industry? Well, certainly business is able to store large volumes of data. There's new ways to communicate, the Facebook, the Twitters, mobile phones. Most of this has happened in about the last 20 years. So now what we see on a case is we have approximately, I'd say generally we have 3 to 5 solicitors or paralegals who are working on a case with us. And they're generally, for periods they'll be full-time, but most of the time they're part-time. They're working on several matters at one time. They usually have about 3 months, and we see, I'd say 25 to 50,000 documents is kind of an average case size. Now, what that means is the traditional brute force method is not practical to be able to review that quantity of documents in that amount of time with those resources. So there's something we have called proportionality. Basically, what this says is you can't, well, say you have $1 million claim, you can't spend, $500,000 processing that claim. So what in reality we have is usually some much smaller percentage can actually be spent on processing this claim. So we can't have, for say 10 years ago we had a case where it was, we had $1 billion claim. We were able to spend, 20 people working full time for 2 years. But on a more modern case, where we have still, we'll have tens of thousands of documents, but your budget is nowhere near as large. So effectively, new software and process have been developed to assist this issue of proportionality. So we come to this point where we have the need for what's called early case assessment. Early case assessment is really for the investigative phase of a matter. So this is where your client may come to you initially, or if you're a government or in-house, a matter may arise. And usually some number of documents are identified as being relevant to an investigation. Usually that net is cast pretty wide, a large section of a server, all the project files, certain people's email for a certain time period. And we start having questions arising, such as who are the key players involved, what are the key terms and phrases being used in this set of information, what are the date ranges in this data, what are the main patterns of communication between the key players. So these kind of questions are things that you want to get answered without having to kind of look through everything on this 200 gigabytes, which could be a million documents. So basically, this early case assessment gives a number of benefits. So really, it actually helps you come up with this kind of high-level analysis of the entire data set. We're able to focus on specific, sometimes particular custodians and specific folders that might be more relevant than others. We can tell if there's a case to answer for really you're trying to tell your client in these 200 gigabytes on this hard drive, do you actually have a case here? Should this progress? And this early case assessment attempts to give those kind of benefits. So some of the benefits that you get quite specifically are graphical, easy to interpret, kind of at-a-glance overviews. We have email threading that helps keep all the threads together. Deduplication, this is where if I send you an email and both of our inboxes get kind of captured, both of our email stores get collected, there'll be two copies of that email. And basically we can tell that both of the emails are actually identical. So we also, typically we can remove about 30% of documents from that. We also have near duplicate detection, and that's where you may have different versions of documents. That can keep, really what it does is it won't remove them automatically, but it can tell you, look, we have 100,000 documents in here, 30% are guaranteed duplicates, so we can remove those, and another 20,000 are similar, so they're different versions. So if you're trying to decide, well, how much is this going to cost, how much time will it take to review this set, you can say, well, we know at least a large chunk of the documents are actually, potentially the same. We finally have something called predictive coding, which I think I'm going to tell you more about at the end of the demo. I can actually show you in the software what it is. Okay, so next we have I'll show you actually how this would work for a early case assessment workflow. So effectively, we have, you'll start getting back reports after you give us this hard drive. We run some software over it. It can take, depending on the size, maybe a day, maybe 2 days. We're able to start giving back reports pretty quickly. So we can tell you things like these are the custodians on this drive. These are the folders available on the set. These are the number of documents in each of these folders, the date ranges of all these documents, the statistics on those exact and near duplicates. We can tell you all the keywords used in the set. So when you start to think about what keywords do you want to actually use, you can start to develop your keywords based off of actually seeing what keywords are available in there. We can also show you some spider graphs showing the patterns of communication between some of the key players. This is really helpful for getting a quick kind of glance, and I have a slide. The next slide here shows you kind of this spider web of the actual communication graph between the various people involved. So finally, after you've kind of gotten these reports, we'll work with you to start looking at some of the documents. Usually one person, kind of the lead, will log in and start looking at a few of the documents and folders. We'll start running keyword searches through this set to give you an idea, what are the results, show you a few of those results, then we can tweak the keywords. Finally, the kind of goal of this early case assessment, one, is so you can tell your client, look, out of these 100,000 documents, we only really need to review 20,000. This is going to be the cost. Or if you're in-house or a government, this is the number of hours, et cetera, that we think this will take. So you can really start to plan. So at that point, you actually would have your subset documents, and we can actually pass into the full review phase. So we'll go ahead and flip on to the next slide here. So now we're into the standard review phase. What we have here is a different challenge. We're actually, let's say after our review phase, we've come up with 50,000 documents, and we end up with a number of questions. So some of these questions that we might have, or the challenges, would be, how are we actually going to divvy up 50,000 documents to these five legal staff members? How are we going to control the quality and consistency of the review so that everyone is reviewing kind of in a similar process? Can we apply the statement of claim or the various legal issues in the case of the documents? Historically, you'd probably sticky note these various documents with different colors, and there's a better way to do that now. And finally, are the junior staff understanding the process and applying it consistently? A lot of document reviewers are kind of straight out of law school, and they're very new to this process. Often it's their first review. So how the software actually helps with that, we have a number of kind of key features to help with these challenges. So we have a batching feature. This basically allows, we could take a very simple batching would be take those 50,000 documents and assign 10,000 to each one. We could also run keyword searches through the software and then assign a single reviewer just to review those specific keyword searches. Finally, we can put custom logic rules into place to improve the quality of the review. So, for example, if a document is partially privileged, we can enforce a rule that a redaction has to be applied to the document. I'll show you with the software, if you're not familiar, that what an actual redaction in the software looks like. So the statement of claim typically is actually converted into a legal issues tree, and then you're able to tag kind of each document against each kind of paragraph in the statement of claim. We'll see that in the software. And then we can actually do some nice graphic reporting on staff speed and the coding results, so we can tell kind of how efficient and accurate they are. We have a chronology feature, which you can build your timeline of events and then the various documents that support them. Historically, I see chronologies get created in some sort of Word document, which is fine, but kind of only one person can work on it at a time, and then you have to go find the documents. Having it integrated into a review system means it's all at your fingertips for everyone to look at and modify it kind of at the same time. We often let counsel or expert witnesses access specific sets of documents. So that removes the need really for sending out print set after print set after print set to either counsel or expert witnesses. Really, the work product that your legal team is creating is preserved during staff turnover, which happens very regularly. And finally, kind of after review is completed, these discovery lists, which a lot of what you're doing, you're just trying to create a discovery list, it's really generated in seconds. You're kind of preparing it the whole way through, and then documents can be provided electronically for exchange. We have something in here called workflow as well, and this is where documents need to kind of move through logical workflows. So a really basic workflow is relevance and privilege, where you're just deciding, is a document relevant to this case and is it privileged? And this standard workflow really just shows, if it's not relevant, it's going to drop out of the workflow and you'll never see it again. If it is relevant, then that privilege call has to be made, and it's either going to drop on into the kind of second pass review or into the second pass review for privileged documents. Typically then kind of a more senior reviewer will kind of quickly review those, either kind of in bulk or one by one, depending. And then he or she approves them, and they move down onto finally the list of documents for disclosure or onto that privilege list of documents. Now, look, this is a really basic workflow. It's not, this is just our standard one. Probably maybe 25 to up to 50% of case teams do actually need just this basic standard workflow. But we do a lot of customization with our customers about what is their workflow and help them kind of modify the software so it fits that workflow. One of the case studies you'll see is a very modified version. So now we're on to the actual case studies in Relativity. So we have three different ones. We have a construction matter, which focused around financial payment disputes. We had a government agency, and there was mismanagement of state resources. And then we had a class action with a failure of state to protect industry. So we'll start with the construction matter. What we did with this one, at the heart of it, it was talking about financial payments, and there was about 150,000 documents, so a moderate number from kind of what we see. What was really interesting about this case, though, is it wasn't really about document review as much about, there was a few other things at play. First of all, there was about 150 legal issues in this case, spread across 30 different litigations, all one matter, but kind of 30 different related litigations. There was about 300 companies involved, and thousands actually of payments between the parties. So what they were trying to figure out was a few questions. So things like which companies were involved in each litigation and each legal issue, which documents relate directly to each company, which payments related to each company, and then, of course, multiple payments were often recorded on one document, but sometimes multiple documents were supporting one payment. So really they wanted to be able to know at a glance, which payments relate to each issue or litigation. They might be working on a specific litigation at one time, and they just want to know, which payments are at dispute here. So we're actually able to modify the system, and we created kind of other tables of information within the system. So we had your classic documents table, which is in every case, but then we created kind of a special issues table for all the various litigations and legal matters, legal issues in the case. We created a table for companies, so the 150 companies each had an entry in their own table. And then the thousands of payments we created as its own table as well. And because of that, we were able to link each of these kind of entries to each other. So effectively, once we were done, you could come in, click on a specific legal issue, and then it would pull back all the documents related to that issue, all the payments related to that issue, and which payments to which documents, and all the companies at play. So this really gets away from document review and gets into the field of case management. So all that stuff that you might keep elsewhere in an Excel file, on notes, we're trying to get it out of kind of your head and into the software itself. Okay, so the next case study has to do with, it was a government agency, and they had about 80,000 highly relevant documents. Now, this again wasn't as much about documents as it was, they had a really complicated legal analysis of the documents, especially with respect to privilege. They had about 4 or 5 different kinds of privilege in the case. Now, they had 20 mostly part-time staff. They had a lot of, they probably had 1 or 2 people who were running it who were full-time, but they weren't, not that all the staff worked part-time, but they were spread across different matters. And some of their staff did work part-time. So they required quite an advanced workflow on how they were going to manage kind of these 20 staffs and all the issues in the case. So what we came up with is, this is a kind of redacted version of their workflow, where they actually were able to, each one of these kind of boxes is an actual set of documents, and documents would move through the workflow based off of various, confidentiality, various privilege, relevance to specific issues, and you could never even get all their 20 staff in the room together for a single briefing because people worked such kind of different schedules. So we were able to set this up, and then each individual staff was assigned out kind of different boxes, and as documents dropped into their boxes, they would review them, and so on. Our final case study is about basically, it's about managing experts. So in this case, they had numerous numbers of experts, and they had to manage sending them hundreds, thousands of documents. They had about 10 experts in the case. Now, historically, you might do this in paper by printing out every document that you send to an expert, keeping a copy for yourself to see what was sent to the expert. But of course, the problem arises then, you pull back one document and you want to know, how many, who is this sent to? Have we seen this document yet, or has it been sent to an expert yet, and which one? So it was quite a logistical challenge to manage that whole process. They also wanted to know what date was that document sent to that expert. So we actually customized the system to be able to manage that process. And what we really did was we kind of had this series of kind of drop-downs in the software, and fields, where basically the review team would start tagging documents to be sent to an expert. They would kind of go into this specific box, which we call a view, where documents are ready to be sent to that expert. The senior reviewer would check them over before they were ready, approve it. They would get sent off to that expert, and by that I mean it was basically they were given a login where once a document was approved for them to see it, they were able to see that document. And the date that it was released to them was kept within the system as well. So very quickly, because we were managing this electronically, the legal team was able to say, all right, which documents have we sent to which experts and when? And have these documents gone to these experts? Have they not gone yet? We were able to quite easily manage that whole process. Okay, so just to summarize kind of the slides that we've gone through so far, the brute force paper method or brute force review method isn't really practical anymore. Basically, that proportionality, we're seeing more and more cases that don't have a huge claim value associated with it, under $1 million, but have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of documents. And you just can't have a senior reviewer reviewing even a junior reviewer reviewing every single document in that case. So something like early case assessment can help give you insight into that case and the data that you have kind of early on. You're able to advise your client or come up with a plan on actually what you're facing. And then an advanced review platform like Relativity really gives you those tools to help, one, manage all the reviewers, and two, all the legal issues to really help prepare for litigation. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump over to Relativity itself. So I'm just going to stop this and go into some sharing. Okay, so you now should be seeing a window with Relativity. So this is actually what Relativity looks like during when you log in. So you put in your username, which is your email address, and then a password, which is unique to the system. Relativity is web-based, so that means you can really log in from anywhere, from the office, from home, on the road. So we'll go ahead and log in. I should say the Relativity sits on a server. It's actually in what's called a defense level T4 server based in Sydney. So all the data stays in Australia. It's one of these bunker type places, so a flood, a fire, it's highly protected, backups, done daily, meets this high level government certification. So we see more and more firms kind of outsourcing to these type of data centers. Okay, so I've gone ahead and logged in to the system. I have access to two cases. I should say that Relativity is highly granular. What that means is we can grant access to users to specific cases, obviously, but also to just folders or specific documents within a case, as well as certain fields of information and features. That's really useful when say like counsel, we set them up with a login. Maybe they're authorized to see everything, but we only want them to see kind of a small portion of the database. And also for our experts, where you certainly don't want them to see everything, they can, we can restrict that down. Okay, so let's go ahead and log into this first case, salt versus pepper, which is a demo case. Most of the data in here is from the Enron data set. So what you're first seeing here, you'll see kind of a list of documents. In the bottom right, we're looking at 74,000 documents. And what we'll see is over on the left, we have a number of folders. This is actually where our documents have come from. So we'll just expand this out. So we could browse in custodians. These are a number of the kind of executives at Enron. Enron, of course, is a massive accounting scandal 15 years ago now, where they were hiding losses at the company in off-the-book entities. And Arthur Andersen was covering it up and improving that as an accepted accounting practice. So let's go ahead and look in. Let's look at Paul Allen. We can browse into his email. You'll notice the actual folder structure of his original Microsoft Outlook is maintained. We can go ahead and click into, let's say, his deleted items. And the screen changes. Instead of seeing all 74,000 documents, we're just looking at the 350. So we can kind of quickly browse through those folders based off of where they've come from. So I'll go ahead back to the whole database now. We have a few other things in here, file servers, so this might have been collected from various sites. We can do a fair amount of searching. So the first thing we can do is just kind of a keyword search. So this really just looks for, is a specific word inside a document somewhere. So we're going to look for the word fraud. So it took, we jumped from 74,000 down to 167 documents is what it found. So it took about a second to search that. So it searched kind of every word within every document and found the ones with the word fraud. Now we also have field data available. So what we can do is we can filter down based off of certain field data. So every document we have the date for. So we could punch in a specific date or a range of dates if that's more helpful. So we have 6 documents that have the word fraud in them and have the date, October 29th, 2001. We can filter down by specific authors. Let's say I just want Courtney there. And then we could further filter down maybe some of our own legal issues that we've tagged. I only want to see accounting documents, so I set that. So we're now down to 1 document. So what Relativity is great for is we can quickly and easily do fairly powerful searching without having to memorize lots of advanced syntax or anything like that. We do have an advanced search, which is can be for some really kind of advanced, heavy searches as well. But most of our clients tend to use this kind of quick filtering. Okay, let's clear all these away, and let's go ahead and jump into a document. Okay, so you can actually see this document as an email. What this is, we're not actually using Outlook to look at this email. We're using Relativity's built-in viewer. So what that means is you don't actually have to have Outlook, say, installed on your machine. And even if you did have Outlook, it's actually just quite a bit faster to review it through this built-in viewer. We also get some bonuses, such as built-in persistent highlighting. What this means is we've put in here the word relativity, the word document should always be highlighted kind of no matter what you've just searched for. We also see it's a bit hard to read with those colors, but Nick Robertson was said to always highlight. This is really useful for, let's say you're doing a privilege review. We can put in the names of the privilege reviewers so that kind of no matter what, anywhere in the system, when people come across documents, they'll see these names highlighted. So it's really kind of a flag to your reviewers so they don't have to memorize kind of every lawyer's name in the case. So we are looking at these. I think I'll show you, we do have what's called kind of an imaged version of this document. And what this is kind of, originally we're looking at just kind of the electronic version. Now we're actually going to look at a TIFF image version. And the reason why you might want a imaged version of the document is for discovery purposes. Typically kind of you have that number stamped on the bottom, and potentially you may have the need to draw redactions or highlights. So here I have a document. I've actually drawn a few things on here already. But basically, the highlighting is really for your own team's internal review. And then the redactions are for discovery purposes. Now, let's go ahead and just draw another redaction on here. We'll draw one with text. Redacted. Now, if I'm a senior reviewer coming back through to check kind of how the redactions have been done, I can turn them semi-transparent so I can actually see through and see underneath that text which is underneath there. So we can go ahead as well. We'll just go ahead and I can delete that off. I can change the text, change it to anything I like, but I'll go ahead and delete this. But these redactions are temporary and kind of always temporary for the review team, but once they're actually discovered, they're burned in permanently. Okay, let's go ahead and look at some of the other things available to us in here. So the first thing is over on the right, we have a number of fields. So we have some of the objective information. So this is actually, what's the document title, what's the date, what type of document is it. But then we have these subjective fields, and these are actually what your team will be filling out. So if we go ahead and click Edit, we have, is the document relevant? Is the document privileged? Is it confidential? And then which legal issues does it relate to? And we can set up actually alerts. So if the document is, we have this hot, really hot, super hot, in fuego. If somebody actually ticks in fuego, we can have it send off an alert right away to the senior partner saying, check out this document. Reviewers found something, the smoking gun, so to speak. Ultimately, they can also type comments in here, whatever. If they want to just leave kind of free-flowing comments, that can be done there. We do have a number of rules, though, we can put into place. So, for example, I have privileged here. I've ticked privilege. I'm going to try to save. And it comes back and it gives me an error saying a privileged subtype must be selected for privileged documents. Now, I need to actually select legal professional privilege or work product for this to be able to move on. So we can kind of put those rules in place to ensure that everyone is kind of coding consistently. Now, this layout here we have is this is a pretty standard layout. We actually have a number of customized layouts that we can do as well. So depending on who's in here, we may give them a different layout. Counsel might need several different fields than, say, your experts. Now, down here in the bottom right, we have what's called our related items. And what this does is this shows us documents that are related in content to this document. So what this does is this actually tells us, all right, this is an email, and then it has 5 attachments here, which are various different types of documents. Now we can go ahead at any point and just jump into a specific document, and it'll bring it up. This here is an Excel document. Something like an Excel wouldn't typically have an image. It would have, it would be placeholdered, and just the native file would be exchanged. So we can see here we have this Excel document. We can still, not even using Excel, we can kind of resize columns. We get our highlighting. Of course, this is kind of a quick version of the document. If we want the actual formulas, then we need to kind of click on the native button, and it will open it in Microsoft Excel. Okay, so let's go back to that parent email. I'll show you a few of the other kind of buttons in here, related items, which gives us information about other documents related to this document. We have one of the key ones in here shows us near duplicates. Now, this one has one. I have a better example document I'll jump ahead to. So this document has 1 of 8. It's what we call a near duplicate set. So what this means is the software has been run over our 70,000 documents, and it's come back and it said we've found 8 documents that are potentially duplicates, so or that are similar in nature. So what this is actually telling me is there's 8 documents here. This one without any kind of similarity description is kind of the master original document, and it's saying there are 3 that are exact duplicates, and there are 4 that are 87% similar. So I want to actually see, well, what are the differences between this document I'm looking at and this kind of master original document. So I have a little button here, this relativity compare. Now I could open up these 2 documents side by side and just try to spot the differences, but we actually have a feature which overlays the 2 documents. So what this is doing is overlaying the 2 emails. We can see that one was forwarded on, and basically some of the text in here has been rewritten. So one of the key sentences is they've changed: a single buyer entered the marketplace on these dates and paid above market prices for San Juan gas with the intent to distort the index. That's been rewritten to just say for San Juan gas, with that intent to distort the index text removed. Now, one of the crimes that was being committed by Enron was actually manipulating prices in markets by restricting supply to drive up the price. So this would be a really key document, and you'd want to, if these were your witnesses, you'd want to definitely, you'd be interested in the person who rewrote this document and removed that key text. Now look, you could do this kind of manually by, well, if you had paper, I mean, that would be, you'd have to remember that you've seen a document that looked like this and go back and find it. Even without this feature in a review system, you could still maybe do some keyword searching. So this just really saves a lot of time from kind of manually running all these keyword searches. And also it highlights the differences for you right away. I had a case recently that revolved around changes in terms and conditions in contracts, and these were contracts with about 10 pages of small print, and it was over a 10-year period over about 20 different financial products. And so the team had to identify when each of the kind of T&Cs changed. And look, they could have done it manually by printing it all out and lining them all up and reading through every single thing, but they used this technology which identified exactly where the differences were. So that was just saved them a huge amount of time. We also have, with this system, everything is audited. So if we go ahead and click on this history here, we actually get a complete history of everything that's ever happened to this document since it's been loaded into the system. So I can see there's 300 things have happened to it. Maybe updates have happened, maybe just views have happened. This document we mainly use for demoing, so it's really various views. People have been viewing it. Now, look, this is great on kind of a document level because you can say, I'm not sure why this specific document is tagged a certain way. Let me see who did it and go and have a chat with them. And because of that, though, on the macro level, because we're recording everything, we actually get some great reports out of the system, which I'll show you in a moment. So we get to be a bit of big brother, or you get to be a bit of big brother with the system. Recently, we were able to, I had a case where an expert had sworn that he had reviewed all the documents, and we went and looked, he'd only reviewed about half of them so far. So the system was able to kind of catch him out, and then he, hung his head and said, oh yes, well maybe I haven't gotten to a few, and went and reviewed them all. Let's go ahead and jump back out, and I'll show you some of those reporting features. One thing that we briefly touched on before was this batching and workflow. So typically what happens is we sit down with you, we talk about what you're trying to accomplish, who are the reviewers, we make batches, and we assign them out. And then documents work through the various kind of boxes of review as we're going through it. Now, because of that organized system, we're actually able to get some really nice reporting. So what I'll do here is I'll turn on what we call these pivot reports. And I have a couple kind of predefined, but each time you run them, it gets updated. So I have one here, reviewer progress. So this is running based off of whatever reviewers have done up until this moment. And we're basically reviewing the various batches that we've assigned out and how they're being reviewed with respect to relevance. So let's take a look. We have about 10 reviewers, and let's see how they're doing. So Brian has reviewed 123, it's not relevant, 25 is relevant, and 50 he's not sure about. Okay, well let's just check that compared to some of our other reviewers. It looks to be a similar distribution, except when we come to Elliot here. So Elliot has reviewed 354 is not relevant, and only 9 is relevant, yes. So let's do a little QA here on these 354 and see how, make sure he understands properly, what relevance is. So let's look at some of these emails, these 354 that he's been reviewing. Celebrate the holidays with New York Times, Investor Alliance Survey, Yahoo Newsletter, pre-selected Visa card. Okay, these are, we can now safely say, these are junk. He is actually reviewing these correctly. And not, he does understand. He just happened to get a lot of kind of spam in the set that he had. I'll show you one of the other pivot reports I have here as well. And this is custodian by date. Now what this is purely objective data, so we pulled this from the actual kind of email itself. And it just gives you a quick snapshot. This is almost like an early case assessment report. Where we see the custodian and then the years of email in here and the quantities for this. So, quickly you can see K-Man in 2001. We have lots of K's documents here. And we can do these with kind of any fields in the database. So it's a powerful tool for quickly assessing either what's going on kind of in your document set. Okay, I only have a couple more minutes here. I want to show you something called concept searching. So let me turn this off. Now, let's just take a step back. Historically, how kind of document reviews happen, we talk about that brute force method where you've reviewed every single document. Currently, kind of, I would say keyword searching is very popular, and that's where you have an agreed set of keyword terms, and you search all your documents based off these keywords. Now, the problem with keywords is often you don't know, what words were being used specifically, so you may not use the right ones in your searches. Also, you may find that there's too many false positives. So, you're running searches, but just too many words are coming back that aren't relevant. But you can't exclude that word because some of the documents are relevant that it's bringing back. So you start coming up with a really complicated and this, but not within 5 of this. And I've seen some pretty monster search terms that really don't work very well. So what the industry has come up with is something called concept searching. Now, concept searching it attempts to solve the problem of keyword searching. It uses what's called latent semantic indexing, which is an algorithm to try to relate documents together based off concept. So, for example, if somewhere in this set somebody's talking about their pet dog and somewhere somebody's talking about their pet cat, it'll figure out that dogs and cats are related because they're both being talked about as being pets. That's a really simple version of it, but that's kind of the basics. So what are the actual benefits? So I'm going to show you 3 quick benefits of the system. So the first is keyword expansion. So think of this as a thesaurus. So what this is doing, we're going to type in the word fraud. Typically if we type this into a regular thesaurus, it would come back with, theft, deceit. This thesaurus is only for our documents. So the analytics engine has run across these 74,000 documents and built a thesaurus that's customized just for this document set. So we'll search for the word fraud, and it comes back and it says fraud is most related to accountant, Anderson, auditor, Arthur. Now, remember, it doesn't know anything about the case, but it's saying, look, fraud and Arthur Anderson are definitely being described about in the same way. So right away, we kind of want to start searching for more on Arthur Anderson rather than just fraud, and we can search on these terms. Now, also in this case, these guys were naming their off-the-books companies after Star Wars characters in an attempt to hide them. So if we actually look for one of these, we'll find that off-the-books and Jedi, Chuko are all related terms. Now, you wouldn't think necessarily to be searching for Star Wars terms, but if you look for off the books, then Jedi is going to come back. So, look, maybe your client isn't actually actively trying to hide things, but, maybe you're using the wrong keywords when you're searching for things, and this helps address that problem. The next issue we might come across is I have here a privileged document log. Now, how did we come up with this? We brainstormed every lawyer, every law firm we could think of, and we ran those names through the database. We then reviewed all those, and we tagged them privilege yes, privilege no. We came back with 48 documents. Now, what's an obvious problem with our method? There may have been a lawyer or a law firm that worked on this that we didn't know about, or the law firm changed their name. It happens regularly. Changed their email domain. That could happen as well. So what we're going to ask the system to do is we're going to feed it these 48 documents, and we're going to say how many documents in this database are conceptually similar to these 48 documents. It comes back with 390. Well, let's actually review some of these then. Why are they being brought back? Maybe they are potentially privileged. So we can use it as kind of a QA check on our own documents. Okay, and then the final benefit to analytics that I'll show you today is called clustering. This is where we can actually feed a set of documents. Could be the whole database, but it could be just a smaller set of documents. And it tells us, it does a first pass review, and it tells us what these documents are talking about. So we've run it here on Mike Maggi. He is an executive at Enron, and it's come back with 10 categories. So look, and it's given us things like Rabarsky-Nelson, these are 2 women who work there, Enron.com, maybe something to do with the website, assets, and it's put them into gas assets and continued business assets. So it kind of, maybe you've gotten this from your client, maybe you've just gotten a dump from the other side. It does this quick first pass review and breaks it down into conceptual clusters. Now, sometimes we're not exactly sure what it's talking about. Let's try to get an idea. Rabarsky-Nelson, there's 2 women at the firm. What are they actually talking about with Mike? Now keep in mind, it doesn't group these together because it's the same people. there's something else going on that are being discussed about that will group it together as a concept. So we'll take a look in here, and we'll look at some of these emails. So the first email, I like the glasses, from Mike to Amanda. She says, well, then I guess I'm going to have to wear them more often. Okay. Let's jump ahead. This is now a different woman. I guess we'll see. So what was my answer to your proposal? I'm still waiting for one. I'll have to think about it. Okay, so he's kind of casually discussing things with some of the women at the firm. Let's jump back and see if anybody else is lumped into here. In total, I believe there's 1,100 documents in this cluster. So we have Amanda Rybarski, we have Michelle Nelson. Let's see. We'll put them in date order. And we have another woman at the beginning, Amanda Hubble. So let's go ahead and click on one of her emails between Mike and Amanda. We bring it back up and we see, I like your shirt. Is it new? Yes, I went shopping yesterday. I know, that's what I said. You did a good job. So basically, you can tell here he's just casually flirting with all these women at his firm. Now, Relativity Analytics has correctly lumped them all into the same cluster. It's up to us, though, to say whether this cluster is actually relevant to our case. It can't determine that. So this really depends on what kind of case it is. If it's a accounting scandal, then probably these are completely not relevant, and we can either disregard them or review them at the end, with a low-level reviewer. If this was a sexual harassment case, these would be highly relevant, and we would want to delve right directly into these. So this clustering feature just gives a real aid to help guide your review. Okay, well, I think we'll probably wind down there. Were there any questions? I'll just flip over here. Does anyone, I don't think there's been any asked so far. Any questions during the webinar you've been holding back with? Any questions? If you can just type them in and we'll address them. Okay, well, we're not seeing any typed in, so certainly if you have any questions later you think of, certainly feel free to email them through. This video will be available as a recording in the next few days, which we'll send a link out to, so you're welcome to refer to it any time. And thank you all for attending today, and I'm sure we'll have more coming up in our series. And thank you very much.